What if the quietest person in the room wasn't weak, but watching, learning, and planning something no one could see coming? In a galaxy ruled by power and pride, one silent human cadet shattered the strongest minds, not with force, but with a single brilliant move that broke the entire system. This isn't just a story about strategy. It's a story about how silence can become the loudest voice in the universe. If you are new here, then please subscribe this channel and show thumbs up by liking the video. Now let's move to this wonderful story. The Starlight Command Institute was not just a school. It was a symbol of excellence across the galaxy. Floating in a perfect orbit above a fading red star, the Academy looked like a glowing ring of metal in the sky. Inside its polished halls, the best minds from hundreds of star systems trained to become the next generation of commanders. Species with scales, fur, feathers, and even liquid forms walked side by side, all focused on one goal: to rise through the ranks and defend the Galactic Union. The Academy was a place of order, logic, and strength. It was not a place where anyone expected to find a human. Humans were new to the galactic scene. When other species were exploring wormholes and building star cities, humans were still discovering electricity. But what they lacked in history, they made up for in determination. They had a strange way of pushing forward no matter the odds. Some admired it, most didn't understand it, and at the Starlight Command Institute, many saw it as a weakness. So when a human cadet was accepted into the elite strategy unit, everyone talked. His name was Thomas Rhin. He arrived quietly, carrying only a small bag and a calm expression. No special armor, no glowing tech implants, no visible signs of strength or speed. He looked painfully average. The other cadets watched him with curiosity, amusement, and in some cases doubt. Each of them had been selected from the top of their species, our warriors, scholars, and tactical minds shaped by centuries of evolution. Thomas just stood there, silent and still, like he had nothing to prove. On the first day, the cadets stood in perfect lines under the silver-blue dome of the command atrium. Lights flickered across the ceiling, displaying the names of past heroes. Commander Vrel stepped forward, tall and sharp, his robes flowing behind him like shadows. His four eyes scanned the group, his voice cold and exact. He was from the Kironi, a species known for their mental discipline and zero tolerance for weakness. "Welcome," he said, though the word didn't sound welcoming. "You stand at the gate of the most demanding program in the known universe. Most of you will not finish. The few who do will be forever changed." He walked slowly, inspecting each cadet. When he stopped in front of Thomas, the room fell even quieter. "Human," he said, not unkindly, but with the weight of a challenge. "Your kind has a reputation for noise, emotion, distraction. I expect discipline here, not stories." Thomas said nothing. He didn't blink. He didn't shift. His eyes stayed forward, his posture unmoved. Commander Vrel narrowed his gaze, waiting. Then, with a small nod that almost resembled approval, he moved on. As the weeks passed, Thomas became known as the Quiet One. He rarely spoke. When he did, it was only when asked a direct question. "Yes, Commander." "No, sir." Nothing more. He sat alone during meals, trained alone in the simulator rooms, and walked the academy halls like a ghost. While the other cadets shared theories, formed study groups, and traded stories of their homeworlds, Thomas watched, listened, and stayed silent. Some thought he was arrogant. Others believed he was shy. Mira Joss, a cadet from the Solari species, wasn't sure what to make of him. She had sharp eyes and a mind built for patterns, and something about Thomas felt intentional. Like silence wasn't just a habit, it was a choice. One day, after a grueling obstacle test in the gravity dome, Mira approached him. "You're full of secrets," she said, not unkindly. Thomas looked at her, gave a polite nod, and walked away. Mira didn't push, but she began to watch him more closely. The instructors were less patient. Behind closed doors, they questioned Thomas's place in the program. His test scores were decent but not remarkable. He didn't stand out in physical challenges. He didn't lead, didn't argue, didn't shine. Commander Vrail called him a slow shadow. One of the assistant evaluators, a nervous being with too many eyes and not enough confidence, suggested that the selection system might have made an error. But the system didn't make errors, not often. And so Thomas stayed. As days turned into weeks, rumors began to grow among the cadets. Some believed Thomas was a spy. Others said he was a prototype, a half-machine soldier built by human scientists to test the academy. One of the twins from the airy planet of Ventari claimed that Thomas never even slept. Of course, none of these rumors were true. Thomas was just a human, just a cadet. But the mystery around him only grew stronger the longer he stayed silent. And still Thomas watched. He watched every drill, every instructor, every mistake his fellow cadets made. He didn't interrupt. He didn't correct. He just stored it all away behind a calm face and quiet eyes. He wasn't the strongest. He wasn't the fastest. But he was learning, every single moment. No one knew what Thomas was really thinking. No one knew what he was waiting for. But deep inside that silent mind, a plan was forming. One that would shake the academy, rewrite the rules, and remind the galaxy that even the quietest voice can change everything. The second phase of training began without warning. One morning, the cadets were called to the central dome before sunrise. The floor beneath them shifted, and slowly, the entire platform descended into a lower chamber, glowing with red lights and thick with heat. This was the start of the physical trials, a series of carefully designed challenges to test each cadet's limits. Everything from strength, speed, reaction time, and endurance was pushed to the edge. For some species, the trials were tailored to account for their unique biology. For others, the difficulty was increased to balance natural advantages. But, for Thomas Rinn, the human cadet, nothing was adjusted. He received the standard trial, hard, brutal, and built for the average. The gravity room was the first. While the cadets from heavier worlds adjusted quickly, and those with extra limbs found new ways to move, Thomas simply ran. The pressure on his joints was intense, but he said nothing. The instructors watched closely, waiting for him to fall behind, but he didn't. He kept pace, his breath steady, his eyes forward. Others collapsed or stumbled. Thomas did not win, but he did not fail. And as always, he did it all in silence. In the obstacle drills, where reflexes were tested with fast-moving barriers and unpredictable traps, Thomas showed control. Not perfect speed, not flashy movement, but steady, careful steps. He calculated each motion like a puzzle. When the walls closed in or floors shifted beneath his feet, he adapted. Quietly, again and again, he found his way through. No cheers, no complaints, just focus. Other cadets groaned, shouted, argued, even laughed during these trials. Thomas did none of that. When he was called forward, he stepped up. When he was finished, he stepped back. The instructors couldn't read him. He never looked exhausted, but never confident either. It was like he kept all his emotions locked in a room that no one could open. That made some nervous. Between physical drills, the cadets faced long hours of mental strain, endless strategy, exams, memory tests, and scenario-based decision-making. Thomas performed the same way here, too. His answers were correct but never creative. His strategy models were clean but unremarkable. On paper, he was average, maybe slightly above. Certainly not the kind of student who would stand out in a galaxy full of species evolved for high-speed learning and multitasking brains. Behind closed doors, the instructors gathered again. Commander Vrail looked over Thomas's reports with mild irritation. He's capable, but we don't train for capable. We train for exceptional, he said. One of the senior analysts, a sharp-eyed instructor named Kalor, tilted his head. He doesn't act like a washout, Kalor said. He's consistent, controlled. Another instructor, Droma, disagreed. Or maybe he's hiding how limited he really is. A quiet mind can mean an empty one. Vrail frowned at that, but didn't argue. He simply marked the humans file with a yellow tag. Caution, under review. Outside those rooms, the cadets were beginning to talk too. Some still believed Tomas was some kind of experiment. Others were sure he was waiting for something. Mirajas, who had been watching him since the first week, was still undecided. She had seen quiet cadets before, but not like this. Thomas didn't just avoid conversation. He avoided attention altogether. She had seen him stay behind after drills, double-checking his equipment with almost no motion. She had once seen him sit on a bench for an hour simply staring at a wall like he was thinking through 100 different futures. Most cadets formed groups. It made training easier. They shared tips, covered for each other, even offered distractions when one of them was under pressure. But Thomas always stood alone. He never asked for help, he never gave any. Mira found that strange, not rude, just unusual. One night, after a long day of heat endurance tests, Mira sat beside Thomas in the food hall. He didn't look up. She didn't speak right away. Then finally she asked, "Do you even want to be here?" Thomas glanced at her for a second, then returned to his food. "Yes," he said simply. "Then why are you doing everything alone?" she asked. "You don't talk. You don't connect. That's not how people succeed here." "I know," Thomas replied. That was all he said. And that was the last time anyone tried to question him directly. Weeks passed. Trials became harder. Sleep became shorter. The weakest cadets began to drop out. A tall, six-eyed tactician from the civet species collapsed during a pressure simulation. A winged cadet from the airy tribes of Polari quit after failing 3 agility tests. The class was shrinking. But Thomas remained. He wasn't fast. He wasn't strong. He wasn't brilliant. Butte was always there. Always watching. Always doing just enough. Not outshining anyone, but never falling behind. Like a shadow that refused to fade. Commander Vrail reviewed the progress logs again. He didn't understand what the human was waiting for. "He's not failing," he said, "but he's not excelling either. What is he?" Kaylor shrugged. "Maybe he's a mirror. Only shows us what we expect to see." Vrail didn't like that answer, but he couldn't deny the truth. The human wasn't gone yet, and something in the silence felt planned. As the next phase approached, with cadets preparing for real battle simulations, whispers about Thomas grew louder. Some laughed, some doubted, some waited. But no one truly knew what the quiet cadet would do next. Only Thomas knew. And he wasn't saying a word. The final phase of training was where most cadets either proved themselves or failed completely. It was no longer about running or solving tests on screens. Now, they would face what the Academy called living tactics. A series of full-scale battle simulations where cadets would take control of entire fleets in carefully built virtual worlds. Each move would be judged, each loss recorded. There were no second chances. The simulations used real-time data, advanced artificial intelligence, and emotionally responsive avatars. Every decision would have consequences. This was where leaders were made or exposed. The tactical immersion chamber was the heart of the Academy. From the outside, it looked like a massive silver sphere, covered in lines of light that pulsed gently like a slow heartbeat. Inside, the room could become anything. Oceans, planets, starfields, or city ruins. When a cadet stepped in, they didn't just see the simulation, they lived it. Sounds, movements, and even temperature were perfectly replicated. The goal was not to test knowledge, but instinct under pressure. Tomas Rin stood quietly at the edge of the group when the instructor explained the first scenario. The other cadets leaned forward, their eyes sharp. Thomas stayed still. As usual, he didn't ask questions. He didn't write notes. He just listened. The first few rounds paired each cadet against AI opponents. Most of the cadets had trained with tactical simulations before. They used traditional strategies, aggressive assaults, defensive shields, trap and flank tactics. Mira Joss won her round in under 6 minutes with a flawless pincer move. Another cadet used a cloaked fleet to destroy an enemy base before it activated. Everyone expected the same from Thomas, or worse. Many thought he wouldn't survive 5 minutes. But his match didn't go the way anyone expected. From the beginning, Thomas did nothing aggressive. He split his fleet, sent decoys into open space, and kept his real ships in hidden orbits. The AI opponent launched a full attack on the decoys, wasting energy and time. By the time it realized the trick, Thomas had already captured the resource zones and disabled its central control ship without a single direct fight. The instructors were silent for a long moment. No one had seen a strategy like that. It wasn't flashy, it wasn't fast, but it worked. And it had been executed with such calm precision that the system had no time to respond. One of the instructors, Droma, leaned forward and whispered, "That wasn't luck." Mira watched the replay later that night. She replayed one section 3 times. Tomas had positioned a scout ship in just the right spot to create a shadow on the sensors. It was a tiny detail, easy to miss, but it had made the difference. She finally said what many were starting to feel. He's not silent because he's confused. He's silent because he's planning. In the days that followed, Thomas faced more opponents, stronger ones, with better algorithms. Still, he kept winning. Not always easily, but always cleverly. He never used the same trick twice. One match, he created a false base to lure enemy fleets into a dead zone. Another time, he pretended to surrender, only to use the distraction to overload the enemy's central grid. The cadets stopped laughing. The instructors stopped doubting. Everyone began to pay attention. Rumors changed. Now they said Tomas had trained on secret Earth systems, that he was a tactical savant or a hidden genius. But the truth was simpler. He had been watching all along, every movement, every lesson, every conversation. While others talked, Tomas had listened. While they rushed, he had waited. Now his strategy wasn't just seen, it was starting to unsettle even the instructors. Commander Vrail watched Thomas's 5th simulation from the control booth. This time, Thomas faced 2 AI fleets at once. Instead of dividing his forces, he joined them together into a single formation, then used environmental hazards, asteroid belts, solar flares, and gravitational pull to reshape the battlefield itself. He didn't outfight the enemy. He outthought them. It was like watching someone turn a maze into a straight line. When the simulation ended, Vrail turned to the other instructors. "He has no pattern," he said. Keylor nodded. "He makes his own." The cadets began talking to Thomas more. Some asked questions. Others offered him food or tried to include him in strategy discussions. Tomas answered politely but kept to himself. He had no desire for attention. He didn't need validation. He was there to finish something he had started a long time ago. Mira finally challenged him directly. It was meant to be a friendly match. The others gathered to watch. She was one of the top cadets, fast-thinking and sharp. She had studied every one of Tomas's replays. She was ready. The match lasted 30 minutes. For the first 10, Mira pushed him hard, using aggressive, unexpected moves. For the next 10, Tomas pulled back, letting her feel like she was winning. Then in the last 10 minutes, everything changed. Tomas flipped the board. He revealed that every move Mira had made had been predicted, even guided by small things he had done earlier. It ended with a single command, one that Mira never saw coming. When the match ended, no one spoke. Mira stood in silence, then smiled. "You knew exactly how I think," she said. Tomas gave a rare answer. "You think in straight lines. I think in circles." And with that, he walked away, leaving, everyone wondering just how deep his strategy really went. The final simulation was not just a test. It was the end of the entire program, the moment that would decide who graduated and who would be sent back home. For weeks, the cadets had trained, fought, and studied. They had been pushed to their limits in every way. Now each one would be placed inside the tactical immersion chamber for the last time. But this time, it would not be a solo mission or a test against AI. It would be a real-time battle against each other. 10 cadets. 1 winner. The challenge was clear. Survive, lead, and outsmart everyone else. The rules were simple. Each cadet would start with a fleet, a base, and a section of the battlefield. Resources would be limited. Alliances were allowed, but not enforced. Betrayal was expected. There would be no pause, no help from instructors. Everything would happen in real time, and only the strongest tactician would remain in control at the end. Commander Vrel stood before them with his hands behind his back, his sharp gaze scanning each face. "Today," he said, "you will not be students. You will be commanders. Your actions from this point forward are your own. Remember, only one of you can finish at the top." Thomas Rhyn stood at the far end, quiet as always. He nodded once, not to anyone in particular, then stepped into the chamber. The others followed. The room shifted, flickering into a vast open space filled with stars, moons, asteroid fields, and glowing resource zones. Each cadet vanished into their assigned zone. The final match had begun. In the first 10 minutes, 2 cadets formed an alliance. They agreed to take out weaker players and split the spoils. Another 3 created a short-term truce, but trust was thin. Everyone watched the clock and the map. Everyone except Thomas. He didn't move his fleet right away. He let the others scatter, let them claim territory and trade shots. Instead of rushing to fight, he sent a few small ships to the edges of the map, collecting information and hiding in dark zones where sensors didn't reach. The other cadets began to notice. "He's not fighting," one said. "He's stalling," another replied. But it wasn't stalling. Thomas was mapping everything. Their movements, their attacks, their resource patterns. He didn't need to win battles. He needed to understand the field better than anyone else. By the halfway point, 4 cadets had been eliminated. One betrayed an ally too soon. Another overextended their fleet and was ambushed. Mira Joss was still in the game. She had avoided early fights and focused on building a powerful defensive line. When her fleet clashed with another, she won by using the terrain to trap enemy ships between 2 moons. The simulation updated rankings. Mira was in 2nd place, Tomas was in 8th. But that number didn't matter, because in the background, without alerting anyone, Tomas had done something no one expected. He hadn't built his base into a fortress, or tried to expand his army. Instead, he had studied the patterns of the entire system, the simulation itself. Every movement had a rhythm, every command a response. Slowly, quietly, he had tested the boundaries, and he had found a weakness, a gap in the way the system handled overlapping commands. Most wouldn't notice it, but Thomas wasn't like most cadets. As the battle reached its final stage, the remaining 4 players clashed in the center of the map. Explosions filled the simulated sky. Ships blinked out. Bases fell. Mira led the charge, her fleet organized and sharp. But just when it looked like she would take control, something strange happened. The simulation stuttered. Several fleets moved out of sync. Commands lagged. The map flashed. At first, the instructors thought it was a glitch. Then they realized what had happened. Thomas had triggered a series of overlapping feedback loops in the simulation's command structure. It wasn't sabotage. It was strategy. He had used legal, accepted moves in a way no one had tried before, not to win the battle, but to break the system itself. The chamber went silent. Mira's fleet froze. The remaining cadets couldn't issue commands. Only Thomas's ships moved freely. He didn't attack. He didn't claim victory. Instead, he sent a single message through the simulation's broadcast line. "I found the edge of the game." The message read, "It's time you made a better one." The simulation shut down. The instructor stared at the screen, stunned. Commander Vrel stood slowly, his hands clenched behind his back. He didn't speak for a long time. Then finally he said, "Bring him to the review room." Later that day, Thomas sat alone across from the Academy's top commanders. No one accused him of cheating. He hadn't broken any rules. He had simply understood the system better than anyone else. He had found its limit and gone beyond it. "You didn't win," Vrel said, "but you did something no cadet has done before." Thomas nodded. "The test wasn't about victory," he said quietly. "It was about seeing what others miss." In the end, Thomas Rynn did not graduate as the top cadet. He was offered something else entirely, a role in the Academy's Design Council, helping to build the next generation of training systems. The others would become fleet commanders. He would shape the minds of future commanders. As he left the chamber, Mira caught up with him. "You knew how to win," she said. "You just chose a different ending." Thomas looked at her, calm as always. "Winning isn't always the point," he said. "Sometimes you have to show the galaxy how the game is played." And then, without fanfare, he disappeared into the halls of the Academy, leaving behind a story no one would forget.